someone watching this video has used one of these drugs in the past month. Maybe it's you. Here's what nobody tells you. Most people using drugs have zero idea what they're actually doing to their brain chemistry. 11 substances. 11 lies your brain gets told. Let's break down exactly what each one does, starting with the one sitting in your refrigerator right now. Number 11. Alcohol. Humans have been fermenting yeast, sugars, and starches to create alcohol for at least 10,000 years. Ancient Sumerians brewed beer. Romans refined winemaking. Every culture across every continent developed some form of alcoholic beverage. It's woven into our history, our rituals, our celebrations. It's also a known human carcinogen that kills 95,000 Americans every year. Here's the first shock. Alcohol doesn't get digested. It's one of the few substances that absorbs directly through the stomach lining into your bloodstream, reaching your brain in under 60 seconds. Once there, it doesn't flood a single neurotransmitter. It disrupts multiple systems simultaneously. Alcohol artificially activates GABA receptors, which calm neural activity, while simultaneously blocking glutamate receptors, which excite neurons. The result? Your brain's communication system slows to a crawl. This isn't relaxation, it's systemic neurosuppression. The immediate effects are well known: impaired judgment, slowed coordination, and memory blackouts. But here's what happens in the 24 hours after a single binge. Your immune system stays significantly weakened, leaving you more vulnerable to infections. Your gut lining becomes permeable, a condition called leaky gut, allowing bacteria and toxins into your bloodstream that should stay in your intestines. Over years of regular use, alcohol causes permanent structural damage to the frontal lobe, the brain region responsible for reasoning, planning, and impulse control. Brain scans of chronic drinkers show visible shrinkage in this area. Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome is one of alcohol's most devastating consequences. It's caused by severe thiamine, vitamin B1 deficiency, which chronic alcohol use creates by interfering with nutrient absorption. The syndrome causes permanent amnesia. Patients lose the ability to form new memories. They live in a perpetual present, unable to remember conversations from 5 minutes ago. There is no cure, there is no recovery. In 1985, researchers at UC San Diego performed brain scans on college students who drank socially 2 to 3 times a week. After just 5 years, frontal lobe damage was already visible. The subjects averaged 22 years old. Alcohol is also directly linked to at least 5 different cancers: mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, and breast. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies it as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. Cirrhosis, the scarring and hardening of the liver tissue, is one of the top 10 causes of death in the United States. The liver tries to repair itself after repeated alcohol exposure, but the scar tissue that forms can't perform the liver's filtering functions. Eventually, the liver fails entirely. Cardiomyopathy, the weakening and enlargement of the heart muscle, is another long-term consequence. The heart stretches and loses its ability to pump blood efficiently, leading to heart failure. Here's the paradox. Alcohol is legal, socially acceptable, and served at weddings, holidays, and business dinners. Yet it kills more people annually than heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine combined. It's responsible for more emergency room visits, more domestic violence incidents, more fatal car accidents, and more preventable deaths than any illegal drug. Number 10. Anabolic steroids. The year was 1988. Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson shattered the world record at the Seoul Olympics, winning gold in 9.79 seconds. 3 days later, his urine test came back positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid. The gold medal was stripped. His record was erased. But the scandal launched a global conversation about a class of drugs most people assumed were just about muscle. Anabolic steroids are synthetic versions of testosterone, the hormone that triggers muscle growth and bone density. Professional baseball players use them to hit more home runs. Cyclists use them to climb mountains faster. The International Olympic Committee and the NFL eventually banned them outright. Here's what they actually do. Steroids tell muscle tissue to grow larger and stronger by binding to androgen receptors inside cells. But testosterone isn't just a muscle hormone, it's a brain chemical. And flooding your system with synthetic versions doesn't just build your biceps, it rewires your emotional regulation. Roid rage is a real clinical phenomenon. Users report extreme aggression, paranoia, and violent outbursts triggered by hormones flooding their brain can't process. In 2017, a Massachusetts teenager using steroids attacked his mother with a knife during an argument about dinner. He later told investigators he couldn't control the anger. Physically, the damage is just as severe. Steroids cause liver tumors, shrunken testicles, and an abnormally enlarged heart, a condition called ventricular hypertrophy that raises heart attack risk even in 20-year-old athletes. In teenagers, they can permanently fuse growth plates early, stunting final height by several inches. But here's why steroids rank at number 10. They don't directly kill through overdose or respiratory failure. Their danger is cumulative, hormonal, and often delayed. The real threats start when substances begin manipulating neurotransmitters directly. Number 9. Cannabis. Cannabis exists in a legal and scientific paradox. As of 2021, 36 states have legalized it for medical or recreational use. The National Institutes of Health funds research into its therapeutic potential for chronic pain, epilepsy, and PTSD, yet federally, it remains a Schedule I controlled substance, the same category as heroin. The active ingredient, THC, works by flooding your brain's reward system with dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure and motivation. That flood is the high. But it also disrupts the hippocampus, the brain region that consolidates short-term memories into long-term storage. That's why users often can't remember conversations that happened 5 minutes ago. Here's the part that changes everything. Age. If you're over 25 and your brain is fully developed, occasional cannabis use causes temporary impairment that fades when the drug clears your system. But if you're under 25 and you use cannabis frequently, the disruption becomes permanent. A 2019 study published in the Journal of American Medical Association tracked adolescent cannabis users for a decade. Those who used weekly before age 18 showed measurable, irreversible deficits in attention, memory, and decision-making compared to non-users, even after years of abstinence. Their brains had developed differently. The cardiovascular effects are immediate and measurable. Within minutes of use, heart rate increases by 20 to 50 beats per minute. For someone with an undiagnosed heart condition, that spike can trigger arrhythmia or even cardiac arrest. In 2020, a 19-year-old college athlete in Arizona collapsed during basketball practice. The autopsy found THC in his system and an undetected congenital heart defect. The combination was fatal. At high doses, particularly in edibles where THC concentration is difficult to control, cannabis can trigger acute psychosis, hallucinations, paranoia, and detachment from reality. Emergency rooms across states with legal cannabis have reported a steady increase in these cases, particularly among first-time users who consume far more than they intended. Cannabis isn't benign, but compared to what's coming, it's still in the minor leagues of neurological manipulation. Number 8. Mescaline. Long before LSD was synthesized in laboratories, indigenous communities in Mexico, Peru, and Ecuador were using mescaline for spiritual ceremonies. They extracted it from the peyote and San Pedro cacti, plants that have been central to their religious practices for thousands of years. Mescaline is a naturally occurring psychedelic that works on the same serotonin receptors as LSD, producing intense perceptual distortions, geometric patterns that seem to breathe, colors that shift and pulse, and sounds that take on visual form. Users describe profound spiritual experiences and a sense of connection to the universe. But here's the part the ceremonies prepare people for, and recreational users often don't expect. Mescaline makes you violently sick first. Nausea and vomiting are almost universal in the first hour after ingestion. It's not a side effect, it's how the body responds to the alkaloids in the cactus. Traditional users view this as part of the purification process. Modern recreational users experience it as 30 to 60 minutes of retching before the hallucinations even begin. The psychological risks are severe. In individuals with a family history of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, mescaline can trigger full psychotic breaks. Not just visual distortions, but actual breaks from reality that require hospitalization. A 2016 case study documented a 23-year-old man who experienced persistent paranoid delusions for 6 weeks after a single mescaline experience. He believed strangers were communicating with him through television commercials commercials. He eventually recovered, but only with antipsychotic medication. Mescaline ranks at number 8 because its dangers are primarily psychological rather than physiological. It doesn't damage organs or stop breathing, but it can permanently alter brain function in vulnerable individuals, and those effects can last far longer than the 12-hour trip. Number 7. Bath salts. In 2012, emergency rooms across the United States started seeing a terrifying new pattern. Patients arriving in states of extreme agitation, paranoia, and violence. Some had superhuman strength, breaking through restraints. Others experienced hallucinations so vivid, they attacked people they believed were demons. The common thread, a class of drugs being sold in gas stations and convenience stores in colorful foil packages. To bypass drug laws, synthetic cathones were marketed as jewelry cleaner, plant food, or phone screen cleaner, with packaging reading not for human consumption, but everyone knew what they were really for. The street name was bath salts, and they were chemical cousins of cocaine and methamphetamine, only far more unpredictable. Here's why they're so dangerous. They're manufactured in illegal labs with no quality control. Users have no idea what dose they're taking or what other chemicals might be mixed in. What's sold as bath salts one week might have a completely different chemical structure the next week, as manufacturers tweak formulas to stay ahead of law enforcement. Synthetic cathones flood the brain with dopamine and norepinephrine, creating intense euphoria and energy, but the psychological effects are catastrophic. Users report extreme paranoia, believing people are following them or trying to harm them. The hallucinations aren't abstract, they're vivid, terrifying, and actionable. In 2012, a Miami man high on bath salts attacked a homeless man, biting off portions of his face before police shot him. Toxicology later confirmed synthetic cathones in his system. The physical damage is just as severe. Bath salts cause rhabdomyolysis, the breakdown of skeletal muscle tissue. When muscle fibers die, they release proteins into the bloodstream that clog the kidneys, leading to acute kidney failure. A 2013 study in the Journal of Medical Toxicology documented 15 bath salt users who required emergency dialysis. 3 needed permanent kidney transplants. Bath salts rank at number 7 because the combination of unknown chemical composition, extreme psychological effects, and organ failure makes every use a gamble with completely unpredictable stakes. Number 6. LSD. In 1938, Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann was working for Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, synthesizing compounds from ergot, a fungus that grows on rye. He was searching for a circulatory and respiratory stimulant. His 25th attempt, lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD-25, seemed unremarkable. He set it aside. 5 years later, in 1943, Hofmann decided to revisit LSD-25. While synthesizing a fresh batch, he accidentally absorbed a tiny amount through his fingertips. Within minutes, he felt dizzy and anxious. He went home, lay down, and experienced what he later described as an uninterrupted stream of fantastic pictures, extraordinary shapes with intense kaleidoscopic play of colors. He had just become the first human to experience an LSD trip. 3 days later, Hofmann intentionally dosed himself with 250 micrograms, what he assumed was a threshold dose. It was actually 10 times higher than necessary. He began experiencing severe anxiety and visual distortions. He asked his lab assistant to escort him home by bicycle. During that ride, his perception of time collapsed. He believed he was frozen in place while the buildings around him warped and twisted. April 19, 1943 is now known in psychedelic culture as Bicycle Day. LSD attaches to serotonin receptors, hijacking the brain system for regulating mood, perception, and sensory processing. At doses as small as 20 micrograms, it triggers hallucinations, synesthesia, hearing colors, seeing sounds, and profound alterations in thought patterns. A typical trip lasts 8 to 12 hours, during which users have no control over their perceptions. But here's what Hofmann didn't discover until much later. For some users, the trip never fully ends. Hallucinogen persisting perception disorder, or HPPD, is a condition where visual disturbances, trails behind moving objects, halos around lights, and geometric patterns in peripheral vision return spontaneously weeks or years after the last dose. In 2018, a 26-year-old software engineer in California reported seeing breathing walls and color shifts every time he entered a dark room. He hadn't used LSD in 3 years. His neurologist confirmed HPPD. There is no known cure. LSD itself isn't toxic to organs. It doesn't cause heart failure or liver damage, but it permanently alters brain chemistry in ways science still doesn't fully understand. That earns it number 6.
Number 5. Ketamine. Ketamine was approved by the FDA in 1970 as an anesthetic for surgeries. Unlike other anesthetics, it doesn't suppress breathing, making it invaluable in emergency medicine and battlefield trauma care. Veterinarians use it for animal surgeries. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. But in recent years, ketamine has gained attention for something completely different: treating severe, treatment-resistant depression. In 2019, the FDA approved S-ketamine, a ketamine derivative, as a nasal spray for patients who haven't responded to traditional antidepressants. Studies show that a single ketamine infusion can relieve suicidal ideation within hours, something no other psychiatric medication can do. Researchers believe it works by rapidly rebuilding connections between neurons that depression has severed. But ketamine's medical promise exists alongside its recreational danger. At low doses, ketamine creates a dreamy, detached state. At high doses, it causes what users call a K-hole, a state of complete immobility and dissociation where the conscious mind feels entirely separated from the physical body. Users describe watching themselves from across the room, unable to move or speak. For some, it's terrifying. For others, it's the point. Here's the hidden cost. Ketamine is one of the few recreational drugs that causes direct, irreversible organ damage unrelated to overdose. Chronic use, especially at high doses, destroys the bladder lining, causing a condition called ketamine-induced cystitis. The bladder shrinks, becomes fibrotic, and loses the ability to hold urine. Patients urinate dozens of times a day, often with excruciating pain and blood. In severe cases, the bladder must be surgically removed and replaced with a pouch constructed from intestinal tissue. A 2012 study in Hong Kong tracked 30 chronic ketamine users. 19 had severe bladder damage. 4 required complete bladder removal. All were under 30. Ketamine ranks at number 5 because it represents a paradox: a medication that can save lives and a recreational drug that can destroy a vital organ, depending entirely on how it's used. Number 4. Cocaine. Cocaine is extracted from the leaves of the coca plant, native to South America. For centuries, indigenous communities have chewed coca leaves for mild stimulation and altitude sickness relief. But when chemists learned to isolate and concentrate the active alkaloid in the 1850s, they created something far more dangerous. By the 1980s, cocaine had become one of the most trafficked drugs in the world. The violence surrounding its distribution was so extreme, it led to the creation of Red Ribbon Week in American schools, honoring DEA agent Enrique Quique Camarena, who was tortured and killed by a Mexican cartel in 1985. Cocaine is a powerful central nervous system stimulant. It works by blocking the reabsorption of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine in the brain. Normally, neurons release these chemicals, then quickly reabsorb them to reset the signal. Cocaine prevents that reabsorption, creating a massive traffic jam of neurotransmitters. The result? Intense euphoria, energy, and confidence. But that high lasts only 15 to 30 minutes. When it ends, dopamine levels don't just return to normal, they crash below baseline. The user feels exhausted, depressed, and anxious. The only relief is another dose. That cycle is the neurochemical foundation of cocaine addiction. The cardiovascular effects are immediate and severe. Cocaine constricts blood vessels and spikes heart rate. In 2017, a 23-year-old Boston University athlete collapsed during a routine basketball game. The autopsy found cocaine in his system and a ruptured heart valve. He had used cocaine twice in his life. The second time killed him. Chronic snorting destroys the nasal septum, the cartilage dividing the nostrils.
Heavy users develop a perforated septum, where a hole forms in the middle of the nose, causing chronic nosebleeds and total loss of smell. Some require reconstructive surgery, others live with permanent disfigurement. But the most terrifying aspect of cocaine is its unpredictability. Even in young, healthy individuals with no history of heart problems, a single dose can trigger a fatal heart attack, stroke, or seizure. There's no safe dose. There's no way to predict who will die. Cocaine ranks at number 4 because it combines immediate lethality with long-term damage, all while being chemically engineered to demand repeated use.
Number 3. MDMA. In 1912, German pharmaceutical company Merck first synthesized MDMA, not as a party drug, but as an appetite suppressant. It went largely ignored for decades. Then, in the 1970s, a small group of psychotherapists began using it in clinical settings, believing it helped patients open up emotionally during therapy sessions. By the 1980s, MDMA had escaped the clinic and exploded into rave culture and electronic music festivals. Users called it Ecstasy, or Molly. It became synonymous with all-night dancing, glow sticks, and a feeling of intense emotional connection to everyone in the room. MDMA floods the brain with 3 neurotransmitters at once: serotonin, mood and emotion; dopamine, pleasure and reward; and norepinephrine, energy and alertness. That flood is the high: euphoria, warmth, empathy, and boundless energy. Users describe it feeling like they love everyone around them. Strangers become best friends. Music feels transcendent. But here's the critical detail most users don't understand. Your brain didn't create that serotonin from nothing. MDMA forces neurons to dump their entire serotonin reserves all at once. You're borrowing a week's worth of happiness in 4 hours. When the drug wears off, there's nothing left. Serotonin takes days, sometimes weeks, to replenish. The result is a crash characterized by severe depression, irritability, anxiety, and cognitive fog. Users call it Suicide Tuesday because the worst effects often hit 2 days after use. A 2011 study published in Neuropsychopharmacology found that MDMA users showed measurable deficits in memory and executive function even after months of abstinence. Brain imaging revealed reduced serotonin transporter density, evidence of lasting neurological changes. The physical dangers are just as severe. MDMA raises body temperature and heart rate while suppressing thirst and the urge to rest. In crowded, overheated environments like music festivals, users dance for hours without drinking water. The result is often hyperthermia, dangerous overheating that can trigger organ failure. In 2013, a 19-year-old woman died at a New York music festival after her body temperature reached 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The cause? MDMA-induced hyperthermia combined with dehydration. Her kidneys failed. She died within hours of arriving at the hospital. The jaw-clenching phenomenon users call molly jaw is real. It's caused by involuntary muscle contractions from overstimulated motor neurons. Some users wake up the next day with chipped teeth and extreme jaw pain from grinding their teeth unconsciously for hours. MDMA ranks at number 3 because it doesn't just alter brain chemistry temporarily, it depletes critical neurotransmitters your brain needs to function, leaving lasting neurological damage that can take months to repair if it repairs at all.
Number 2. Heroin. Heroin is processed directly from morphine, a natural substance extracted from the seed pods of opium poppy plants. Morphine itself is one of the most effective painkillers in medicine, used in hospitals worldwide for severe pain management. But when chemists added 2 acetyl groups to the morphine molecule in the late 1800s, they created something far more potent and far more dangerous. Heroin crosses the blood-brain barrier faster than morphine. Once inside the brain, it converts back into morphine and binds to opioid receptors, the same receptors your body uses for its own natural painkillers, called endorphins. The result is a massive wave of pleasure and relief, followed by hours of drowsy, detached calm. Here's what makes heroin so dangerous. It doesn't kill you through violence or excitement. It kills you quietly by convincing your brainstem to stop breathing. The brainstem controls involuntary functions: heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. Opioid receptors in the brainstem regulate respiratory drive. When heroin floods those receptors, it tells your body that breathing isn't necessary. Your respiratory rate slows from 12 to 16 breaths per minute down to 4, then 2, then it stops. This is called hypoxia, lack of oxygen reaching the brain. Without intervention, it causes coma, permanent brain damage or death. The person doesn't gasp or struggle. They simply stop breathing, often in their sleep. Friends find them blue and unresponsive hours later. In 2020, a 28-year-old graphic designer in Seattle used heroin alone in his apartment. His neighbor found him the next morning, slumped on a couch, cold to the touch. The medical examiner ruled it a classic opioid overdose, respiratory failure leading to hypoxia, then cardiac arrest. He had been using heroin for less than 6 months. Long-term heroin use causes collapsed veins from repeated injections, making it progressively harder to find injection sites. Users move from arms to legs to hands to feet, eventually resorting to injecting into the neck or groin. Collapsed veins never fully recover. Infectious endocarditis, infection of the heart's inner lining, is a common and often fatal complication. Bacteria from unsterilized needles enter the bloodstream and colonize heart valves. The infection erodes the valve tissue, causing heart failure. Treatment requires months of intravenous antibiotics and often open heart surgery to replace the damaged valves. Heroin ranks at number 2 because it hijacks the exact neurological system your body uses to stay alive. It doesn't kill you through heart attack or organ failure. It simply tells your brain that breathing is optional, and your brain believes it.
Number 1. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is a fully synthetic opioid developed in 1959 by Belgian chemist Paul Janssen. It was designed for one purpose: managing extreme post-surgical pain in hospital settings. It's 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. In controlled medical environments, it's a miracle drug. Outside those environments, it's the deadliest substance on this list. Here's the terrifying difference. With heroin, users generally know they're using heroin. With fentanyl, they often don't. Because fentanyl is so potent and so cheap to manufacture, drug cartels now press it into counterfeit pills designed to look identical to prescription painkillers like Percocet, Vicodin, or Xanax. A teenager buying what they think is a single painkiller from a friend might actually be ingesting a counterfeit fentanyl-laced pill. There's no way to tell by looking. The lethal dose of fentanyl is approximately 2 milligrams, an amount smaller than a few grains of salt. For comparison, a lethal dose of heroin is about 30 milligrams. The margin of error with fentanyl is nearly non-existent. In 2021, fentanyl was involved in more than 70,000 overdose deaths in the United States, more than any other drug. The victims weren't all opioid users. Many were people who thought they were taking a prescription medication, using cocaine, or even smoking marijuana laced with fentanyl without their knowledge. A 16-year-old high school student in California took what he believed was a Percocet to help with back pain after football practice. It was a counterfeit pressed with fentanyl. He went to sleep that night and never woke up. His parents found him unresponsive the next morning. The autopsy confirmed fentanyl as the cause of death. He'd never used opioids before. Because of fentanyl's extreme potency and lethality, the DEA now regulates pharmaceutical fentanyl under the Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, or REMS program, one of the strictest control frameworks in medicine. Only certain medical facilities can stock it. Every dose is tracked. Every prescription is monitored. But none of that stops illegal fentanyl. It's manufactured in clandestine labs, smuggled across borders, and mixed into other drugs to increase potency and profit margins. Users have no idea it's there until it's too late. Fentanyl ranks at number 1 because it has fundamentally changed the rules of drug lethality. You don't have to be a chronic user. You don't have to be an addict. You don't even have to be trying to use opioids. A single pill, one time, can stop your breathing permanently, and you won't know it's fentanyl until you stop waking up.
11 drugs. 11 different lies your brain gets told. Steroids lie about hormones. Cannabis lies about memory. Mescaline lies about perception. Bath salts lie about reality itself. LSD lies about permanence. Ketamine lies about connection. Cocaine lies about reward. MDMA lies about emotional reserves. Alcohol lies about safety. Heroin lies about breathing. And fentanyl? Fentanyl doesn't even let you know it's lying. Every single one operates on the same fundamental deception. They borrow, block, flood, or hijack chemicals your body already makes. They tell your neurons to fire when they shouldn't, or stop firing when they should. They create pleasure your brain didn't earn, energy your body doesn't have, and relief from pain that isn't real. And every single one demands payment. Serotonin depletion, dopamine crashes, respiratory shutdown, permanent brain damage, organ failure, death. The high is never free. Somewhere in your neurochemistry, in your cardiovascular system, in your liver or kidneys or heart, there is always a cost. And your brain, your irreplaceable, unrepairable brain, is the one that pays it. Thank you for watching. If you found this information valuable, subscribe so you don't miss future videos. See you in the next one.